Say hello to the Medicare-for-all Caucus. So this is a brand new caucus for House Democrats that has been created in the wave of a lot of progressive challengers now coming into the House, as well as the general leftward lurch of the Democratic Party, which I think is great. Now, the caucus is expected to have over 60 founding members, and of course, it was announced earlier today. That's about a third of the 193 House Democrats, with more expected to sign on in the coming weeks, which is awesome. Now, the new Medicare for All caucus is basically returning to the idea of single-payer health insurance, right? So what they're doing is they're taking the legislation, H.R. 676, the Expanded and Improved Medicare for All Act, and promoting it. And they're saying, this is what we're running on. Now, Keith Ellison, of course, is the main sponsor of that piece of legislation, taking over from the now retired and disgraced John Conyers. Now, look, John Conyers did a lot of terrible things as far as in his personal life, but when it came to legislation, and also when it came to civil rights, he had an amazing record. So H.R. 676 is a hell of a legacy, especially to lead. And, of course, a lot of these congressional Democrats, these House Democrats, are saying that's the legacy that we want to sign on to. That's what we want to see getting pushed forward. Medicare for all. Now, the bill, of course, if you're not familiar with it, eliminates all private employer-based health plans and forces millions into a new government plan with no premiums or deductibles. Now, private insurers will still exist, but they will only provide supplemental insurance. So that virtually eliminates all private employer-based health plans. So again, if you have supplemental insurance, that will cover the things that Medicare for All does not cover. And I think those things are, mainly things like plastic surgery, or at least that's the way that I think that it should work. So this is an incredibly strong bill, a piece of legislation, and would do a lot of good for the American people. This is not, as some might have painted it as, a public option. It's not Medicare for, it's not Medicare X. This is true single payer. Now, the reason I point that out is that just like anything, you're going to have centrists that try to hijack the message and ride on the popularity of Medicare for all. Like there is, for example, one person running in Michigan to be the governor that doesn't quite necessarily know what Medicare for all actually means and says, oh, we should just expand Medicare, but then doesn't have very many details. Now that, of course, is one of the so-called progressive candidates running for governor here in Michigan that was questioned by The Intercept on that. And Thandar had no idea. Like, oh, no, I'm going to expand Medicare. But that's not the same thing as single payer. Now, Dr. Abdul Al-Sayed, who's running as the true progressive in that race, he already has his own plan. It's called MishCare. So you might want to look that up. But anyway, centrists will hijack this message in order to ride the coattails on it and push for a public option. Now, look, a public option, it should have been something that we already had, because that is a more centrist idea. And it should have been a starting point, and it actually should have been inside of the ACA. However, thanks to people like Joe Lieberman, it is not inside the ACA. And so we ended up getting stuck with a completely non-public option system and something that's just run by private insurance. But look, public option, so think about it this way. Paul Krugman, right? So Paul Krugman is your consummate establishment insider. Paul Krugman is looking at Medicare X and looking at, public option plans, and he's like, that's not radical. The public option, that's not radical. That's what's radical, and I think it's in a good context. He might not view it in a good context, but I do. Would be Medicare for all, an actual single-payer government insurance. that eliminates private insurance. That's what this is. But anyway, now Pramila Jayapal, who was talking about this in an interview, she said, "This is a sea change from just 4 or 5 years ago, and people are more likely to see healthcare as a right." Now, she is, of course, she's a caucus co-chair, along with Representative Keith Ellison and Representative Debbie Dingell of Michigan. So, hey, Michigan represent. Now, she also says, "The impetus for this caucus is to have a real discussion and work with our offices to see how a system would really work as we think about implementing it," right? So there is a good step. Now, she also says, "It's about a growing movement to bring Medicare for All system into being," saying that she also wants the caucus to work on having proposals ready if the Democrats take back control of the House in 2018. So they are already working on draft legislation, on proposals. Well, why don't we just go with HR 676? But anyway, now she also credits Bernie Sanders here. She said Bernie Sanders putting that out at that high level was a huge step forward. It built the public knowledge that this wasn't a crazy progressive idea. Well, no, it turns out that most progressive ideas are not just not crazy, they're also incredibly popular. For example, as I said before, Medicare for All itself. It's got, according to a recent Kaiser Family Foundation poll, 59% of respondents want a government-run healthcare system. That's not, there's no ambiguity here. That's not saying, oh, public option or anything like that. No. We want the government to run healthcare. Just saying. And you have a majority of Americans in favor of that. But then, of course, you also have other progressive ideas that are incredibly popular. Living wage, free college tuition for public universities, et cetera, right? Now, as far as Medicare for All goes in the polling, I think the more people know and learn about that plan, the better. And they have to learn about the actual facts of the plan and not about the propaganda. The propaganda is already strong. You have centrists and you have members of the right wing screaming about how socialism is so terrible. Oh my God. It's socialized medicine. We're going to have rationing of care. Well, look at all the other countries that actually do. In fact, we're the lone country that doesn't have a single-payer healthcare system. And you know what? Let me tell you something. Rationing already exists. It just, look, if you don't have the money, then by definition, you can't go to the doctor. By definition, you are being rationed. You are being denied care because you don't have the means to be able to pay for that care. So, what's a worse system? Look, we right now have a system that we spend more per person on healthcare in this country than anywhere else. And what do we get for it? We actually get less than everybody else. We have worse outcomes. We have higher infant mortality rates. We have a lower life expectancy. There are a lot of people with preventable, that have gotten sick with things that they could have prevented had they had access, not just access, but had they had guaranteed health care. And we call ourselves the best in the world. No. Look, there are even some studies, and you want to talk about the cost, because that's what they do, right? Oh, it's going to cost so much. No, according to some studies, Medicare for All would save us $17 trillion over the next 10 years. Why? It's because we already spend an insane amount on our current for-profit system. Why? It's because it's inefficient, and it's based on executive profits. And what are they going to do in order to make more profit? They're going to charge more. Eliminate that profit motive, and then suddenly you can clamp down on the costs quite efficiently. All they care is about profits. That's why it's an immoral system. And that's why we need to replace it. And look, I think it's great that we're seeing a lot of politicians. We're seeing Medicare for All becoming a major platform plank. We're seeing it become mainstream. And it's because of the work of tireless progressives, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Keith Ellison, Pramila Jayapal, all these different politicians that are pushing this into the mainstream, and all the voters who voted for people who want to push this into the mainstream. It's because of you guys that we're having success. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.